Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful ideas in all of history and the incredible journey of the man behind it all, Charles Darwin. So, to really get why Darwin's work was such a bombshell, you have to picture the world he was born into. It was a world that had a very, very different answer to this question.
You see, for centuries, this idea of fixed species was the bedrock of natural history. Every animal, every plant, it was all seen as a perfect, separate creation that had always existed exactly as it was. But one young naturalist was about to hop on a boat and set sail on a voyage that would challenge, well, everything.
All right, so that brings us to our first section, a world just full of questions, and a young Charles Darwin who was ready to go exploring. You know, Darwin wasn't originally supposed to be a biologist. His dad actually sent him to study medicine, but Darwin just found the lectures boring, and honestly, the surgery was pretty horrifying to him. His real passion? It was being out in nature, collecting beetles. And thanks to mentors like his botany professor, John Stevens Henslow, Darwin's curiosity about the natural world just became absolutely insatiable. And that curiosity, it landed him a spot on a ship that would not only change his life, but our entire understanding of biology forever. For nearly 5 years, from 1831 to 1836, the HMS Beagle became his floating lab and his personal university. He wasn't just some passenger, he was an obsessive observer, collecting, sketching, and just questioning every single thing he laid his eyes on. The first big clue, it pops up in Patagonia. He's digging in the dirt and unearths these fossils of gigantic extinct mammals. And the weird thing? They looked uncannily like the much, much smaller armadillos and sloths that were still crawling around in that very same area. This just begged the question, right? Why the similarity? And why were the old ones so massive? It was this huge hint of a deep, historical connection, like a family resemblance stretching across time. Then, he gets to the remote Galapagos Islands, and he notices something really peculiar about the mockingbirds. They were obviously related, but the birds on one island had small, consistent differences from the birds on the island right next door. Now, if every species was fixed and perfectly created, why would you have these little local variations? It didn't make sense. It suggested that the environment itself was somehow shaping these creatures. And then came the most famous clue of them all, the finches. Darwin saw that their beaks were like a set of specialized tools. Some had these thick, heavy-duty beaks perfect for cracking nuts, while others on different islands had these delicate, pointy beaks for picking up insects. He had to wonder, how on earth did each finch end up with the perfect tool for its specific lifestyle? It was as if each beak had been perfectly sculpted for survival, but the sculptor was nowhere to be found. As he sailed for home, all these pieces started clicking into place. In the privacy of his notebook, Darwin jotted down this completely radical thought. The evidence, the fossils, the mockingbirds, the finches, it was all pointing to one startling conclusion. Species were not stable. They could change. So, he gets back to England, surrounded by thousands of specimens and piles of notes, and he begins this secret quest, one that would last for 2 decades, to connect all the clues and build his theory. Then in 1838, while he was reading an essay just for fun, of all things, Darwin has this massive epiphany. The essay was by an economist, Thomas Malthus, and it wasn't about animals, it was about people. Malthus argued that human populations always grow faster than their resources, which leads to competition, a struggle for existence. And for Darwin, a light bulb just went off. He realized this principle applied to everything in nature. He came up with a name for this mechanism, natural selection. It was a really clever analogy to what farmers did, which was called artificial selection, where they'd breed the best livestock. But out in the wild, there's no farmer. Nature itself was the selector, favoring any tiny trait that gave an organism a slight edge. Okay, so the logic behind this is actually pretty simple, and it's beautiful. It all starts with 2 basic facts. First, way more offspring are born than can possibly survive. And second, all those offspring have slight natural variations. Right there, that sets up a constant struggle for existence. Now, in that struggle, any individual that has some random variation that gives it a tiny advantage, maybe a slightly sharper beak or better camouflage, is just a little more likely to survive and have kids of its own. Over millions and millions of years, as those good traits get passed on and build up, they can eventually create entirely new species. Now, Darwin knew he was sitting on something huge, something revolutionary, and frankly, pretty dangerous. He was terrified of the scientific and religious backlash, so he hesitated to publish. I mean, just listen to this. In a letter to a close friend, he said putting his idea on paper was like confessing a murder. That shows you just how radical he knew this was. To suggest that life just evolved through some natural, unguided process, well, that flew in the face of everything people believed. So he waited, and he gathered more and more evidence. For 20 years. Just let that sink in for a moment. For 2 decades, Darwin sat on this world-changing idea, painstakingly building his case in private notebooks and only sharing it with a tiny circle of friends he trusted.
And then, in 1858, a letter arrives from the other side of the planet. It's from a younger naturalist named Alfred Russel Wallace. And get this, while sick with a fever in Borneo, Wallace had come up with the exact same theory of natural selection, completely on his own. It was a brilliant, shocking moment that basically forced Darwin to finally go public.
So this letter just lights a fire under everyone. Darwin's friends quickly arranged for his and Wallace's ideas to be presented together. The very next year, Darwin finally published his big book on the origin of species, and the entire first printing, it sold out on day 1. The world of science was never going to be the same.
So, what was the lasting impact of this one long argument, which is what Darwin called his book? What's the big deal? It's honestly hard to overstate. Darwin gave biology its central, unifying idea. His theory explained both the incredible variety of life and the deep underlying connections between all living things. It became the very foundation for almost every life science we have today, from genetics to ecology to modern medicine.
In the end, Darwin gave us more than just a new science. He gave us a profound new way to see our place in the universe. He showed us that all of life is connected on one vast branching tree. And as he wrote in the book's beautiful final line, there's a real grandeur in this view of life.
And that's really the crucial point here. His theory isn't just history. It's a living, breathing tool we use right now to understand modern challenges. Everything from antibiotic-resistant bacteria to how we can protect biodiversity on a changing planet. Which leaves us with a final thought. If evolution is still happening all around us, what forces are shaping the endless forms of tomorrow?